Well, growing up in my family, my father was one who always, when our gas tank in our car was about half full, he would say, "It's time to fill up." Any of you grew up in a house like that? Anybody else? He would often say, "I think it's time. Give me some money when I was young," and I'd go fill up the tank. And I never, ever remember my father running out of gas. So being like my father, very much like him, I still find myself filling up our car pretty much when it gets to be about half full, or maybe when it's between a quarter and a half, and it always is something that just I have always done. Now, when I married my wife, Kim, she's sitting right here tonight, her family did things differently. Her father and her brothers, they often saw it as kind of a challenge to see how far maybe they could go on empty. Anybody grew up in a family like that? Anybody, we got a few around here. Some people can understand that. The reality was that they have some very notorious stories of times that they have almost run out of gas, or times that they have run out of gas at some very inopportune times. Now, one time when Kim and I were traveling with our family, this was many years ago, we were traveling out west. You came on one of those signs, and the sign said, next service station like 60 miles away or whatever else. And our tank was getting now near a quarter of a tank or whatever, and I thought, I think we need to find a gas station. And Kim said, I think we should just try it. I think it'll be fun. Wouldn't it? It would be kind of fun to just give it a try. Well, we headed down the road, and of course, my whole time was focused on that gauge. I kept watching it all the time. Are we going to do it? And it got lower and lower and lower. And when we finally got to that town, fortunately we made it, but I think we pulled into the gas station on fumes, because when you fill up a gas tank, it's about 18 gallons, and you put in 17.8 or 17.9, you know that you've pretty much exhausted pretty much everything that is in there. Well, a close call like that, of course, has always made me even more determined that I want to keep the gas tank in my car full. Well, in life today, there are many comparisons that I think we can draw from that illustration. Truth is that there are tons of people today, tons of people who maybe are living their lives on empty. And maybe you understand that. Maybe there's times you feel as if you're living on empty. There are some people today who are kind of just living on the fumes, where they are maybe near empty in their lives. Many people today do not keep their life tank full. And as a result, there are lots of people today who are literally running out of gas. Now, I thought it would be kind of cute to put in the song, and of course it ages me a little bit. 1977, Jackson Browne had a song, "Running on Empty." I don't know if any of you remember that song or whatever else, but yeah, so I thought maybe the band should sing that tonight. We go, "Running on Empty," but you know it, huh? But that was the thing, running on empty. And back in 1977, he was reflecting on the fact that a lot of people are running on empty. Well, the reason for this, of course, is I think the pace of our lives today, the busyness of everything that we're involved with, the demands of our work, the unrealistic expectations that individuals often place on themselves. And of course, we often say that we are oftentimes our own worst enemies, because I put lots of expectations on myself. All of those things that are happening in life today have a way of draining us. They have a way of draining the spirit, a lot of times, right out of a person. And the result is, of course, a common cry today is that a lot of people are saying, "I'm totally exhausted. I'm totally running out of gas." And then add to that the feelings that many people today have of disappointment, the things that are common, the pressures of work, the pressures of the economy. Some people have the uncertainty of their jobs, along with the energy. And there's a lot of energy that is needed to keep a marriage relationship strong. There's a lot of energy that's needed to keep a family and our children and keep relationships with them. There's a lot of energy that needs to go into good friendships that we have with other people. But as a result of all of these things that are happening today, there are a lot of people today who are feeling depressed. Many people are feeling negative about life. Some people are feeling totally hopeless. Now, as you know, during these weeks here at Calvary, we are talking about this whole theme, Present Over Perfect. And it's an excellent book. Again, Hans has talked about it. And she has a lot of good reflections. The woman that it's in the video, Shauna Nyquist, she deals with a lot of these kinds of issues and the pressures in her life and how we don't need to live a perfect life. And one very important way to handle these challenges and these out-of-control lifestyles that many of us live is to be able to say a positive yes to those life-giving priorities, and to be able to say an assertive no to those things that easily divert our energy from those things of being able to say the yes things or do the yes things well. So oftentimes, not being able to say no to certain things means that I don't do anything as well as I should. Being able to say yes and no are essential to be able to find balance in life and to truly be able to be present over perfect. Now, even Jesus talked about this. There's a number of places Jesus talks about this, but one of those places is Matthew chapter 5, verse 37. And I will have you work with me on this passage. Jesus said these words. He said, all you need to say is simply what? Yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Now, Jesus, of course, is referring here to people who would swear. People would swear on certain things. They would swear that they were going to do something, and then many times they didn't follow through. So he is saying things like, if you say, I swear on a stack of Bibles that I'm going to do this. I swear, I cross my heart and hope to die. I hope God will strike me tonight if I don't. He said you don't need to do that. You don't need to swear on those kinds of promises. He says simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. The reality is that oftentimes people, when they say, I promise to do that and I'm going to do it, and boy, you better know that I'm the best at this, or I'm going to follow through on this, or I'm the only one in the job and the work that's going to be able to do that job well, or whatever else. What happens with a lot of those people? They're the ones that end up failing, right? The big talkers and whatever else. Jesus says we need to learn how to say yes or no, because the other kind of way of doing it comes from the father of all lies, from the deceptive one who continually wants us to say yes to things and maybe make a point about it, but then not able to follow through with what we do. Jesus is saying that we need to simply say yes to our best priorities and those things where we need to really put our energies, and to say no to those things, even good things. Sometimes we have to say no to some things that are really, really good things, but to those things that will distract us from or take energy from us doing the things that we need to do really, really well. Now, Jesus, of course, was one who also faced many of those times in his own life. There were many times in Jesus' life when he was very tired, when his energy was depleted, when he didn't have very much to give to others. And Jesus himself knew that the many demands and expectations made it very difficult for him to be completely present with the disciples, to be completely present with those who needed him a lot, those he needed to give love and care to. In fact, in Mark chapter 6, Jesus talks about how tired and how he had to get away from the crowds to a solitary place. As much as Jesus loved and cared about people, as much as he was the Son of God and had all of those kinds of powers in his life, Jesus knew he needed time for prayer. He needed time to listen to God. He needed times from quality time with his disciples, with those family people, those people that were closest to him. And he needed some time for rest and for renewal. So Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 32 says these words, and we're going to look at these, what Jesus talks about. He says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then because so many people were coming and going, so I want to say this. So then, because what? So many people were coming and going, that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me to a quiet place and get some what? Rest. Come to me to a quiet place and get some rest. Jesus shows by his example, by being the Son of the Most High God, that he needed to sometimes say no to the crowds. He needed to say no to people maybe who needed him at a certain time. He needed to say no to some really, really good things that he could have done if he stayed there. But he had to say no. He didn't have to try to impress people by how perfect he was, even Jesus, the Savior of the world. But Jesus knew that without saying yes to those people who really needed him to be totally present, and saying no to those things that could easily overwhelm him, Jesus knew that he would not be very good to anyone. Jesus needed to go apart. He needed to go apart before his life came apart. He needed to go apart where he could be renewed and refreshed before he could do the ministry that God called him to do. And in the same way, this is also true for you. In order for you to do your jobs well, in order to be loving spouses and parents, in order to give yourself and do your best in serving other people, you need to be assertively able to say yes, and you need to learn to assertively say no. You need to have your personal and relational and spiritual tanks filled, because it's often impossible to do anything very well if you are running on empty. So what does it take? What does it take to fill you up and make you whole? Well, the major problem is that it's very easy to get one's priorities. It's very easy to get one's values or one's goals or even to get the ways that people sometimes try to find to get filled up. It's easy to get all of those things messed up. It's easy to get confused about what's really important in life. It is so easy to get tempted by the wrong fuel, to put one's efforts in the wrong places, and to end up more stretched and more empty than before. Now, it's interesting, back in 2005, Tom Brady, I think we've heard about Tom Brady, we're going to hear about him anymore, and somehow Pat has this guy's nuts about. But it's interesting, back in 2005, now this is a long time ago, so this reflects the fact that this guy's been around a long time. But he had an interview on 60 Minutes. Maybe some of you saw this. I remember seeing it. And Steve Kroft on 60 Minutes interviewed Tom Brady. Now, despite all of his fame and his accomplishments, and you can just think of what more he has done in the following years, all the things that he'd already done, he had already won 3 Super Bowls. He was one of the most highly paid quarterbacks at that time, and he has continued to be. He had a beautiful model for a wife. But Brady told Kroft that it was like something was still lacking in his life. And I wonder how he really feels even today. And he said these words. This is a quote from 60 Minutes back in 2006. He said, "Why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater for me? I mean, lots of people say," he says, "hey man, that's what it's all about. I've reached my goal, my dream, my life." Me? I think it's got to be more than this. I mean, this isn't it. This can't be all that it's cracked up to be. There are a lot of other parts about me I'm trying to find. Well, this message of Tom Brady, of course, is being echoed, I think, many, many times by many people today who are very successful and people who are very wealthy, by great and famous athletes and stars, and by normal folk, simply like you and me, who are simply trying to live each day. Because increasing numbers of people are running on empty in their personal and their spiritual existences. Now, I don't know if you saw the interview last week at the end of the unbelievable Vikings game with quarterback Case Keenum. They asked him, was this the most exciting or the greatest day or the greatest thing in your life? He said, no. The greatest day or the greatest thing in my life was when I gave my life to Jesus Christ. The second most and greatest day in my life was when I married my wife. And the third, this may be, the third thing might be the greatest thing. The third thing. He has his priorities straight. Somebody that keeps those things in line is going to be better able to say yes and no to what's important, right? they're going to be able to keep that focus in the right place. An unknown author once said these words, "Our greatest fear should not be of failure. Our greatest fear should not be of being perfect. Our greatest fear," he said, "is of succeeding at something that doesn't really matter." Succeeding at something that doesn't really matter. Jesus said these words in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. Many of you know them by heart. You say them with me. But what? Seek first his kingdom and righteousness, and what? All these things will be given you as well. In other words, if you want to keep life in the proper perspective, if you want to say yes to the most important things, if you want to keep your life in the right perspective, you need to put Jesus and his kingdom and his purpose first. Like Jesus, you need to be able to worship, which is so important in that priority. To be able to spend time with others and those most important people in your lives. To be able to put serving and helping people at the top of your list. To keep your focus on your spouse and your children and your friends and those people who continue to give life to you. Yet how can a person, an individual, do this? How do we learn how to better say yes and no? Well, I think the first thing and the most important thing is to take an honest look at our lives. Every one of us needs to do that. Take an honest look at our life. We need to admit those places that we're empty. Where am I empty? Where am I trying to find life? What is happening inside of me? What is causing me to do the things that I'm doing? We maybe need to face up to how many of maybe our present activities and busyness are not making us full. What are those things that are draining energy from us? And we need to evaluate what things are of utmost importance for us and what things are not of utmost importance. And then we need to decide. We need to take some action. We maybe need to alter our schedule, and maybe we need to put some new priorities in place. One thing I've learned in my life is that we can't really make those kinds of changes unless we take some drastic action. Just some good New Year's resolutions don't usually do it. I'd say, oh yeah, I'm going to get really better on that, and then I fall back in the old ways. We need to be able to figure out ways and find some ways to find how we can say better and a more assertive yes and no, rather than simply wishing those things to happen. So I think one of those things we need to do is to learn from Jesus himself. We need to take some time to get away from the crowds. We maybe need to get in a small group, and Calvary has a number of small group opportunities. Get in a small group where you can share and talk with somebody else. We need other people to help us and sort those things through. We need to worship faithfully, which I know many of you are doing here tonight, and we need to continue to do that, to keep that priority at the center. We need to spend really quality time with our spouse, quality time with our kids, quality time with our relationships. We also need to realize that we do not need to be perfect. We do not need to be perfect. You don't need to be the star. You don't need to be the best employee. You don't need to be the person that everybody looks up to or everybody bows down to or whatever it might be. You can simply be just who God created you to be. That's all you need to do, is to be who God created you to be. And if you are at peace with that and do what God created you to be, you will probably be a better employee, and you'll be a better friend, and you'll do your job even better. So be assured that Jesus is calling you to come away with him and get away from the crowd. He is calling you to be still and know that he is God. He is calling you to put him first, to say yes to those things that give life, and to say no to those things that are just simply keeping you busy all the time. He is calling you, I believe, to come apart with him so that he can keep filling you up, filling up that tank that sometimes gets drained, sometimes that tank that is simply running on fumes or running on empty. He wants to fill you up, each and every one of you, fill you up with his spirit of love and his spirit of joy. Would you pray with me? Loving God, we just know that life has so many things, and it's just so busy, and it's so hard to say yes, it's so hard to say no, it's so hard to know what's most important. Help each one of us, Lord, to find those important things in our lives that we can put our focus on, and to find those places that we can keep filling ourselves up so that we continue to provide that love and that care to our family and our friends and others. Bless each one of us, Lord, that we might continue to learn that what's most important is that we are present in your love, rather than simply always trying to think that we need to be perfect. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please sing this song with us. Lord, I come. Lord, I come.